Move to Islam. All right, here's the one everyone's been waiting.
I think I'm ready for some Christianity.
Yeah, me too, brother. Me too. Trust me, I stayed up late. I was like, I'm going to spend longer time on Christianity because my mind has been going off with these other things. But we do need to know about Islam because Islam, it's the fastest growing religion in the world.
Yes.
Today, it claims over 1.5 billion followers, okay, and Islam is on pace to outnumber Christianity in a matter of decades, okay? So it's very serious. Now, most Westerners have never taken Islam seriously because it was always one of those religions that was over there, right? That's what we always thought of Islam. That's over there. That's for them across the world. But now with the rise of multiculturalism and immigration, Muslims are no longer over there. They're here. They're our doctors, right? They're our neighbors. They're shopkeepers. They're merchants. So understanding Islam is very crucial. Okay, the terror, the violence. That's one strain of or one expression of Islam. Because of how close it is important that we understand this worldview. Because even in our politics. We think politics and education is gonna change that side of the world. Islam is a religio-political movement. Okay, it takes more than politics to change Muslim states, Muslim nations, and Muslim people. Okay, so a brief mention of some historical facts. Islam was founded by Muhammad. Okay, he's born around 570 A.D. in Mecca, which is a city in modern-day Saudi Arabia. Okay. During his earliest years, Muhammad, he was confounded by the ignorance of God in the religious culture of his time. Now, where Muhammad grew up, okay, in that region, there is a lot of confusion about Christianity and Judaism, okay? A lot of confusion. The issues of the Trinity, although they were settled in other places in the West, by the time they got over to this area in the East, there's a lot of confusion. Okay, and in fact, some of the confusion is actually displayed in the Quran. This is actually one of the big blunders in the Quran. According to the Quran, the Trinity is God, Jesus, and Mary. Okay? According to the Quran, the Trinity is God, Jesus, and Mary. All right? So if there wasn't confusion around that time, I don't know what that is, but that is definitely not the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. So in a sense, this story is actually really familiar. A person confused about which is the right religion, which is the right path to take, and all of a sudden wanting, I want a better way. I want to know the true way. Anybody ever heard this before in Joseph Smith? Same story. Which denomination is the right denomination? God, give me wisdom and show me the way. Bam, Book of Mormon. Kind of similar, in a sense, now with Muhammad. It's the same sort of thing. God gives him a vision. The angel Jibreel, right, Gabriel. If you guys are really wanting to do any sort of apologetics with Islam, I would definitely recommend that you do learn a little bit of Arabic. Learn the terms that they use. Okay, you don't have to learn the Arabic language. Okay, but definitely learn some Arabic, some of the terms that they use.
You know what? And did you mention that? That would be something good to cover. What do you think?
We're going to cover just a bit here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm only going to define a few words for you guys. Okay, but I am not fluent in Arabic. I just know a few of the words that are here and a few others, like fatwa. That's like when you're really bad and the Muslims want to kill you, they issue out a fatwa.
That sounds like
okay.
Diarrhea or something.
Kind of like a.
Anyway,
that's a different, it's a totally different concept. All right. The Quran, okay, the holy book of Islam is the Quran, okay. This book, along with the Hadiths, okay, the Hadiths are a collection of sayings. Hadith, Hadith. Hadith. Yeah.
And it's what?
H.
No.
Hadith.
A collection of.
It's a collection of sayings and basically traditions of the Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, collection
Okay.
of sayings. Okay.
Yeah, so in a sense, these are basically like commentaries. Like there's several different collections of hadith. Okay, so if you ever hear anybody say, well, hadith 316 says, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, hadiths come in various collections. Okay, there's different names for the different collections of hadith. Okay, now let's answer some questions here. What do Muslims believe about ultimate reality? Okay, for Islam, ultimate reality is found in Allah. Okay, Allah is the Arabic word for God. It's a very generic word. Okay, it's the generic word in a sense, like in the Greek language, the word theos. Okay, theos is the Greek word for God. It doesn't mean, in a sense, the Christian God. It could mean any God. Okay, it was the generic term for that. Okay, now the absolute cornerstone of Islamic theology is the doctrine of Tawheed. Okay, and I do have that for you on your notes. Tawheed. Okay, Tawheed. This is the doctrine of the absolute oneness of God's existence. Okay, Tawheed is the absolute oneness of God's existence. It is the affirmation of the existence of only one God. Okay, so in a sense, this is the idea of Tawheed. Okay, what the Shema is for the Jews, you guys know what the Shema is, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Okay, I'm shortening the quote, but that was the Shema. That was basically the Jewish confession of faith in their God. Okay, yes, Deuteronomy 6:4, 6:6, something like that, right around there.
And what do we call? Okay, so
Tawheed.
Okay,
Tawheed.
So now, just in Christianity, what do we call that? Because that would apply.
Let me make the comparison. So, in a sense, what the Shema is to the Jewish faith and the Trinity is to Christianity, such is the importance of Tawheed to Islam. So we wouldn't make the direct connection that Tawheed is Trinity, but the significance of Tawheed to Islam is exactly like the significance of the Trinity to the Christian faith. Okay? Now, Tawheed is usually proclaimed in the Shahada. Okay? The Shahada is the confession of faith by which one becomes a Muslim. Okay? So you guys have that on your notes. Shahada. Okay? It is the confession of faith by which one becomes a Muslim, and it has to be said in Arabic. It has to be said in Arabic. Okay? The Shahada proclaims Tawheed when it says, La ilaha Allah. Okay? Let me see if I pronounced that correctly, right? Okay? La ilaha illallah. There it is. Okay? And that is translated, there is only one God worthy of worship. Okay? I'm doing my best Arabic here, right? Okay? Now, Muslims usually portray the oneness and the greatness of God in the phrase, Allahu Akbar. You guys have probably heard that in movies. Right? Anybody seen American Sniper? You'll hear it from there, right? When they were shooting American soldiers, and if during the war in Iraq, if you saw videos of the snipers that would shoot at American soldiers, horrible things to watch, but you would often hear, they would make the shot, and then all you would hear was Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. That's what you would hear. Okay, what that means, literally translated, is God is great.
And they chant that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It means God is great. Okay, now that's what it translates to. Okay, but the idea of it is that God is greater. Okay, or God is greatest. Okay, so the idea is that whatever it is that, in a sense, that they've just taken control over, that they've just expressed their dominance over, when they say Allahu Akbar, that is their expression of saying God is greater than that. That whatever set itself up against Islam, God is greater than that. Okay? Whatever people trust in, for Muslims, they say God, Allah, is greater. Now, because God is greater than all, the supreme sin against Allah is the sin of shirk. Okay? The sin of shirk. I think that's the last one that you guys have there in your notes, possibly. Okay? Shirk is basically idolatry. Okay? It's idolatry. Okay? It is the one unforgivable sin in Islam. Shirk.
And that's the biggest sin against Allah.
Against Allah, yes. Okay? So, I want you to hear how offensive Christianity sounds to a Muslim. Because there is only one God, and God exists only as one person, in Islamic theology, to say that God has an equal in the Son is shirk. It's to set up Jesus Christ as an idol. If we say that the Holy Spirit is equal with Allah as a different person, okay, that is to commit the sin of shirk. If you want to get killed very quick in Muslim culture, okay, go commit shirk. That will get you a fatwa very quick. That will get you a fatwa very quick. Now, I want you to see this as the challenge, too, in Islamic missions. When Christian missionaries, when we go into, you go into a Muslim country, okay, you have to realize that when you're asking them to convert, you're asking them to commit the sin of shirk according to their worldview.
And that's what the Christians do. They go over there and try to, so it's dangerous.
Yeah. So in a sense, evangelism among Muslims, depending on your context. In the U.S., because there's the Sharia law is not here, right? At least in some places, right? Dearborn, Michigan. Anyway, but because we're not under Sharia law, we don't have to worry, in a sense, about being killed. You can still kind of have a rational conversation. You might get the whole "they're up in your face, yelling at you" sort of thing, or a very big disagreement, or a very big concern for the state of your soul from them. Okay, but that's because of the context that we're in. We're in a Christian-influenced nation. But in an Islamic culture, in an Islamic setting, to bring up that conversation is to commit shirk. Okay. Now, what does this mean? Okay, what all this means for Islam is that there is no personal relationship with Allah. Okay? There is no personal relationship with Allah. Instead, there is only submission to His will. Okay, that's what Islam means. Islam means submission.
So, one-sided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very power-driven. If you have one God, in a sense, if you have one God, and so this is where we can kind of appreciate the doctrine of the Trinity more. But if you have only one God who's always existed as one person, that God doesn't know how to relate to people. That God is about power. So when He creates subjects. He creates subjects who are created basically just to serve Him, and that's it. Versus the Christian God, you've got a God who is three persons in one substance. At the very essence of the existence of a triune God is relationship, is personality. So the Christian God relates to people. He relates to people. In Islam, there is no personal relationship with Islam. You try that garbage, and you're going to get shirk real quick too. Okay?
They don't accept the story of creation?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. In fact, because Islamic theology basically claims to be a continuation, in a sense, of Judaism and Christianity, they do accept, actually, the Old and the New Testaments. They do believe that they've been corrupted, though. Okay, they do believe that they've been corrupted.
And they've been reworded.
Yeah, and so they'll cite a lot of textual issues with the New Testament, especially. It's funny, but a lot of modern Muslims argue exactly the way liberal critics argue against the text of the Bible. Their arguments against the Bible are just basically taken from liberal critics. Very interesting.
Well, they call Christians the people of the book, but they figure the book's corrupted.
Yeah, there's a little kind of play there, because there's at one point in the Quran there's even something that says something about paying attention to the book itself and to follow the teachings of the book. To which it's like, well, if that's true, then I should be able to test the Quran against the Old and New Testaments. I should be able to do that. And if I put them against each other, this one tells me one thing and this one tells me another. But it tells me to follow the book, so I should accept the book, the Old and the New Testaments, over the revelation of the Quran. Yeah, there's some really interesting little tidbits.
Start points that you can start a conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Tawheed is another one. Because in a sense with Tawheed, if all that exists is the one God and He's impersonal, the question becomes, do we ever really know Allah? All-
And the way it seems, they don't.
All that you know is His will. You never know the person, nature, and character of Allah.
Because that's not His nature.
He doesn't actually reveal Himself. He reveals His will. And His will is arbitrary. It's not based on His character. It's disconnected. When we get, in a moment when we get to a point of salvation, I'll bring that out a bit more. Okay? Let me see here. Okay, what do Muslims considers the nature of the world? Okay, like Judaism and Christianity, Islam holds to the creation of the world as from ex nihilo, okay, that is out of nothing, in 6 days. Now, as far as the world works, though, okay, nothing happens in the world apart from the decrees of Allah. This is known as qadr, okay, but it's akin more to Stoic fatalism. Okay, if you remember when we talked about the Stoics, when we were looking at Acts 17 and Paul's encounter with them, they believe that the world basically runs very impersonally, fatalistically, that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. There's nothing you can ever do about it. Okay? So in a sense, Islamic providence is impersonal. Okay? Christian providence, okay, in Christian theology, providence is personal. So in a sense, both theologies will say that whatever happens in the world happens by the will of God or by the will of Allah. But the difference is that in Islam, it's impersonal. In Christian theology, it's personal. That is, there is a personal God behind what happens in the world. Okay. Now, similarly, human beings are the pinnacle of God's creation. Okay. Now, according to Islam, we do not inherit Adam's sin, so they do not believe in original sin. Okay, they believe that everybody is born in a state of innocency, which may imply, according to some Muslims, okay, that we are all born Muslims. Okay, we are born to submit and to do the will of Allah. Okay, now upon death, we are judged by the scales. Okay, if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, then you'll be saved. Okay. Now, there's evidence, however, in the Hadith literature that good deeds are not always the way to paradise. There's apparently a story, there's a contrast where you can have the guy who does 99 good things and does that one bad thing and gets sent to hell for that one bad thing. And then there's a story, you have this guy who did 99 bad things, okay, I'm just kind of paraphrasing it, but he does basically 99 bad things and does the one good thing and Allah accepts him. Part of, and this is part of Allah, because His will, or His character and nature are not really revealed. It's just His will. His will can oftentimes be arbitrary. It can be arbitrary. So Allah can change His mind at any one point about any of His laws, because they don't reflect His character.
Well, I'm glad our God is not like that.
Right? Tell you what. Yeah, we have a God, he says, I do not change. I'm not a man that I should change in that sort of way. He's consistent. He's constant. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Really random question. In the Quran or anywhere in the writings, is it stipulated anywhere that Allah makes promises to His followers? And that's just a point of curiosity on my part.
There would be a few. In fact, one of them, including death here, when it comes to death, is that the people who have a guaranteed place in heaven would be jihadists, okay, children who have not reached puberty, and the mentally impaired. That would be, in a sense, one aspect of a promise. Okay, but like if you I don't know, let's make up a random promise and.
I don't know. Never mind. I'm trying to think of.
How to understand this one. It's a little bit different, but yeah, and in a sense, even if He does promise, if Allah breaks a promise, He's not bound to it because
He's not expected to keep His word.
Not necessarily. Yeah, He can change His word whenever He wants.
So He Himself does not have to. He is not the source of morality.
Allah is greater. Allah Akbar. Allah is greater.
Our God is.
Our God has, in a sense, yeah, the Christian God.
The moral code, but He is the source of the moral code, really.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. We don't want to say we don't want to say He submits to it.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah, He is the moral code.
He don't submit to anything, does
He does. He doesn't. He's self-sufficient because, in a sense, the revelation of the law is the revelation of the person and character of who God is.
But that's not true of Allah. So Allah's just basically like a person, but he's a god. Okay.
Basically. He's always alone. He's completely, in a sense, he's completely disconnected in that sort of way. But he's created us, but what are we made for? We're made to submit.
Is he a loving God?
How to say it?
Come on now.
A God who's essentially ever and always been alone doesn't know what love is.
But then how can he be pleased with his creation?
Does
That's
any-
within his own sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in a sense, like, you kind of have to think about it. I mean, the way that, in a sense, how is Allah pleased?
Do you want to please him?
He may not be. It's very arbitrary.
So there's absolutely no assurance whatsoever.
But they think, the people think,
Unless you're a jihadist.
So why would they want to please Allah out of fear?
Some of it is out of fear, yeah, submission. Yeah, because, I mean, if you look at a lot of the early spreading, I mean, in a sense, how did it spread? Through violence. It spread through violence. If you look at it still in the Middle East, I mean, how does Islam spread? You look at ISIS. Through violence. And through fear and through submission. The people will be made to submit. Those who don't submit, they still allow some people to live under their jurisdiction, but they have to pay the jizya, right? The tax. You have to pay a tax in order to live under, basically, to live in an Islamic community, an ummah. You have to pay your tax to live in there peacefully. But even now, I mean, that's not a guaranteed thing. And I mean, we've seen that that's exactly what ISIS has done. They've revoked the jizya.
So love is just not valued much at all, period.
Love would be completely different in Islamic thought than in Christian thought. A lot of it is more duty than, in a sense, an idea of wanting the best for someone or even having an emotion toward a person.
so it's a chore.
Yeah. It's
Well,
just,
good.
it's something you submit to.
And so, those people over there, okay, now what about the Islamics here in America, for example? What-
A lot of them, a lot of Muslims that have come over into the West, they've been influenced by the West. So I mean, there are some differences. Some of them bring their culture completely here, but once you start having the second and third generation, that's where, in a sense, they start losing a little bit of their cultural
Right.
distinctives
Takes them
from
a while.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that happens to just about any migrating
Yes.
culture that's
Yes.
come into the U.S. into a new place, completely. All right, so interestingly enough, Islam does teach that there will be a resurrection. Okay, they do teach that there is an intermediate state. Okay, in which some either may be purified of their sin, kind of like purgatory. Okay, or that a person is just in soul sleep until their body is resurrected in the great day of judgment. Islamic eschatology, their doctrine of the end times, let me just tell you what, it's bad, people. It's really bad, okay? ISIS actually believes that they are a factor in Islamic eschatology in bringing about a worldwide war, okay?
And they're really working hard at that.
They're
at this
really
time.
working hard. And so this is where understanding Islamic thought helps. How do we deal with these, in a sense, how do we deal with the situation? Do we sit down at a table and negotiate?
Nah.
You can't.
Nah.
Yeah, in a sense, you can't. Understanding the worldview, you can start to understand, well, what's the direction that has to, that we have to go? And whoever was thinking bombs, you're wrong. It's the gospel. Anyway, moving on. All right, so when it comes to knowledge, okay? When it comes to knowledge, Islam believes that reason and revelation are sufficient. Okay, now revelation reveals the mysteries and the will of Allah, while the use of reason helps us to learn about the things that Allah has not explicitly revealed. Okay, one journal article that I read on Islamic epistemology, don't ask me how I even decided to look that up, but it distinguishes between revealed knowledge and acquired knowledge. Okay, revealed knowledge is in the Quran and in the prophets. Okay, in the Old and the New Testament. Okay, that would be revealed knowledge. Acquired knowledge, okay, this is basically knowledge that is acquired through the senses, okay, through research and deep thinking. They can conceptualize, acquire, comprehend, and search acquired knowledge. So in a sense, this is also too why Muslims exert a very high intellectual rigor in their fields, because of their epistemology. I mean, if you go, the doctors that we have around here that are Islamic, okay, I mean, there's a ton of them down here. They're very knowledgeable in their fields. Very, very knowledgeable. Okay? This is part of where that comes from. Okay? Is their belief about knowledge. Okay? That it's through their reasoning skills. Okay? That they attain this knowledge. Okay? Now, human history. Okay? Human history is for bringing all things under submission to the will of Allah. It's to bring the entire, to make the entire world an ummah, okay, which is a community, especially of Islamic believers. So hence politics and religion, those are two forbidden taboos for people to speak of in the secular West. They are indelibly tied together in Islam.
They want to control the world is what they want to do. Just, so it can be one big, what is it, ummah or what?
An ummah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Islam is a religio-political movement that is not content to be one religion amongst many, but it strives to be the religion of every nation. The goal of all life, the good life, and core commitments of Islam are to seek to live all life in submission to the will of Allah. These begin with the 5 pillars of Islam, which are to recite the confession, that is the Shahada, La ilaha illallah wa Muhammadun Rasulallah. Okay? That is the whole Shahada in Arabic. I hope I didn't kill it, right? Okay. I was just telling somebody the other day, I would love to hear, like, Ricky Ricardo Spanish and Arabic just go at it. I think that would be just perfect, okay? But yeah, I think that'd be interesting. But the Shahada, translated, it says there is only one God worthy of worship, and Muhammad is his messenger. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second pillar is to fast during the month of Ramadan, which I think is around June. If you guys remember years ago in the NBA Finals, when Houston was in it, Hakeem Olajuwon, right? He's a Muslim, and there was a concerned status because he is a practicing Muslim, and during the month of Ramadan for them, there was the fasting, and the people were concerned that he was going to be too weak to play, to play any good at all in the finals. I think they won 2 years in a row, so that didn't prove to be a problem at all for him. Okay, to give the annual contribution for the poor. Okay, the almsgiving. I don't know if there was an amount, but I know that it.
Like 4%, because I read that before somewhere.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So a lot of people are going to that because in Christianity it's 10%.
Christianity is sacrificial. 10% is actually Jewish. Yeah. Christianity is sacrificial giving. So that's a game changer. Okay, and then to make a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. To make a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. So from there, the Muslim life is pretty comprehensive, covering actions that are directly commanded, actions that are permitted, and actions that are strictly forbidden. Okay, so these can include restrictions on food. There is an allowance for polygamy within Islam. Okay, you don't have to be polygamous, but there is an allowance for polygamy, multiple wives, in Islam, okay, under certain conditions. And there are also specific directions how to pray, how to cleanse oneself for ritual purity, and no bacon. That just killed Islam for everybody, didn't it, right? No bacon, no pork products. Okay, but that, in a sense, that's the good life, according to Islam, is submission to the will of Allah. How many of y'all are ready for some Christianity?
I'm ready.
Come on.
Yes, I just think the fifth one. What was
The fifth one is making pilgrimage to Mecca.
But that was 4.
Let me see what I have here. The Shahada, fast, the contribution of the poor, pilgrimage, and you're right, I don't have the fifth one. I don't know why. Oh, I believe it's the daily prayers. Yeah, the prayers. I believe it's 6 times a day. Okay.
6 times a day?
Yeah, I believe 6 times a day. Okay.
You know, they say, like we talk about it in Sunday school, that Islam is rapidly growing, and so there's global concern.
Mm-hmm.
So, and two, also, I don't know if Baptist Temple has anything to do with any of those over there. If they have people over there, missionaries.
What was the name, Daniel?
Sam and Michelle.
They were in Florida, right? And they were helping on some place. I know we've had somebody. There was even Sal. That's the one that I'm thinking of. Yeah, that is connected to Unamas, that is doing missionary work amongst Muslims. Yeah, so that would, in a sense, be one of the BT connections.
Yeah.
That would exist there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any more, and I don't know how many other missionaries BT itself supports, but
Called Johnny Matlock. That was in Dearborn.
it's a hotbed right now.
Dearborn, and he's been to many Muslim countries. He's like a missionary. His heart is for Muslims.
It's for Muslims.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, all right. Let's get to some Christianity, and then we can call this one a day or night. All right. So we come down to the final worldview in this study, Christianity. Now, because much has been said about some of the worldview topics of Christianity, of the Christian faith already throughout this entire study, this will not be as thorough as it needs to be, but it will be comprehensive enough to demonstrate that Christianity is not merely a way of salvation, but a worldview to live all of life through. Okay. So first, what is ultimate reality for a Christian? Ultimate reality is the one God who exists eternally in three co-equal and co-eternal persons, namely the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Ultimate reality is the one God who eternally exists as in three co-equal and co-eternal persons, namely the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, Christianity is not polytheistic, asserting multiple gods, or Unitarian, like Islam would be considered Unitarian, or Unitarian monotheism, asserting one God who is one person. Okay, God exists also in and of himself. Okay, God exists in and of himself. That is, he is self-sufficient or self-existing, depending on nothing and no one for his own existence. Okay? The Latin word for this, and we'll get into this next week. I believe, yes, next week I am talking about the God we defend. We would say God is a-se. Okay? The letter A, a space, and then S-E. He is a-se. It just means self-sufficient. He is of himself. Okay? A-se, yeah.
Self-sufficient.
Of himself. Okay. Now, it is important to assert that God is three persons. Okay. This means that at the heart of the Christian faith and worldview, reality is intensely, if not fundamentally, personal. At the root of reality is relationship. Okay. At the root of reality is relationship. Unlike the monistic religions that we have surveyed, God is intensely personal, existing as one God in three persons in perfect relationship with one another. Some of the creation stories of other religions, if I remember correctly, like in the Gilgamesh and in the Upanishads and stuff like that, the world is formed through violence. You hear some of the stories of how the world came into being in Greek mythology too. How did the world come into being? Through violence. Well, this god killed that god, and the blood of that god became the earth that we know, and stuff like that. And so, at the root, in a sense, of those religions is power. Fundamental reality is power. When you look at Islam, I mean, that's kind of what's there. Okay, that's what's there. It's just power that's behind, in a sense, that's behind God. Now, second, what is the nature of external reality? Okay, at this point, we need to distinguish between God, who necessarily exists, and the cosmos, or everything else that exists by the will of God. So I've done this for you guys before. Just let me do this again. Okay, there is God, and there is everything else. Okay? There is God and there is everything else. According to the Bible, God created everything out of no pre-existing material. Okay? That is, he created out of himself through his word. He didn't create from nothing. He created he created through himself, from himself. Okay? He created the world in 6 days. And he rested on the seventh. In a sense, then, okay, so in a sense with this sort of model, reality, okay, at least as we know it as creatures, is dualistic, but not dualism. Okay, dualism is the belief that there exist two fundamental opposites, okay, in a sense, good and evil, and those are the two powers that exist. Okay, that would be dualism. Okay, I'm not saying that. Okay, what I'm saying is that there is God who necessarily exists, and then there is the cosmos, which is everything else. This is not necessary to exist. God can still be who and what he is without creation. That's what we mean by saying that God is self-sufficient, that he needs nothing, no one, or anything to be who and what he is. I will detail that more thoroughly next week. Okay?
Did you talk about some of that last week?
A little bit.
Okay.
Just a little bit,
All
yes.
right. Yeah.
Okay, but you can see kind of how important it is and how fundamental it is to Christianity. Okay, remember Hinduism threw the cosmos in here. It put everything all together as one. Okay, but this necessarily exists. Anything in here doesn't have to exist. It exists in a sense derivatively from God. It comes from God. It's not God. It is not something in a sense that contains God either. Okay, it exists by the will of God.
God and anything else like us, all of us are derivatives, right?
Yeah, we all exist contingently.
Yeah.
I guess you want to put it that way. Okay. All right. So between God and man, there exists an infinite ontological chasm. That is, even the being that God is. Like I said, he is ase. Okay. He exists in and of himself. We need God in order to be. Okay? We cannot jump this way.
Right.
So this is what I mean by ontological distinction here, an ontological chasm. We can never jump over to become God or to get to God or to find our way to God without God. Okay? Rather, God must take the initiative and cross this chasm in order to relate to us. When we talked about revelation, this is what we meant. That God is the one
Has to come down.
he initiates. Yes,
Okay.
he comes down.
Yeah.
Okay? He comes to us. We never go to him without him first coming to us and bringing us to himself. Okay? God is the sovereign king over all his creation. Everything that happens according to the eternal decrees of God, based on the holy and wise will of God. Okay? He accomplishes all of his purposes in the world. He governs and provides for all living things, especially for his church. Okay? Especially for his church.
Majestic.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah. Now, important for a Christian worldview is the belief that the material world is fundamentally good. The material world is fundamentally good. Upon creating the world, God said it was good, and he even said it was very good when he completed his creation. Now, although creation lies under a curse now because of Adam's sin, so this is also something part of the Christian worldview, is this idea of the fall, the entrance of sin into the world. Okay? Creation has not lost its fundamental goodness, though it can be used, or we should say misused, right, to produce instruments of sin, and though God can still use those things as a means of his judgment. Okay? But that doesn't take away the fundamental goodness of creation. So this is where Christianity rejects the Greek idea that, in a sense, that the body is something to be escaped from. Interestingly enough, in their theology, you want to know why they cremated the body? You want to know where that got introduced? Because the body was the thing to be rid of. And that's initially where cremation came from, is because the body was the thing to be gotten rid of and escaped from, right? Get the Atman out. That was one way of for sure doing it. But if you look at Judeo-Christian thought, the hope was always, in a sense, in a resurrection and in the fundamental goodness of the body. So burial was always a more Christian response. So there was theology behind some of these things.
And some people,
Okay.
even now, they think that they're escaping by that.
Yeah.
By, what is it? I can't
Cremation?
Yeah, cremation.
Yeah. God will find all the pieces and put them back together. That body's coming back. Yeah, that body is coming back. Okay. Now, what is a human being? In Christian theology, in Christian worldview, a human being is a combination of body and soul knit together as a psychosomatic unit. Okay, a psychosomatic whole. Okay, that is there exists there exists a union between body and soul. We don't know what else to call it except, psychosomatic union, okay, that exists between body and soul, okay? So we're not just a soul inside of a body, okay? That's not asking a lot. Oh, the real me is, no, all of what we are is part of the real us, okay? All of what we are is the real us. Now, this is distinguished from the views of humanity as merely an immaterial existence, such as Greek thinking, or even pantheistic worldviews, such as Hinduism and Buddhism. Other worldviews view the body as a thing to be escaped from, okay, that is, ancient religions, they practice cremation. I already mentioned that point, I got ahead of myself there, okay? But the essence, okay, so the essence of what makes us human is the image of God that's in us. It is the image of God that God himself gives to each and every person. That is what fundamentally makes us human being. Okay, so it's not just that we have reason. Okay, it's not just that we make choices. Okay, I think that we can face it. Even animals, quote unquote, make choices. How they make them are different. But what makes us human in our choices is the image of God that we bear. We bear the stamp of our Creator. It's so indelibly marked into us that all of life is lived before the face of God. There is no escaping God in any place at all. We will ever and always bear that image in us. I've dealt with that in previous studies, so I'm not going to say much else, but it bears saying that God has communicated something of himself without making us gods. But he's made us like him. We're analogous in a sense. We're an analogy of God, if you want to put it that way, okay? The analogy is not one-to-one, okay, but in a sense, because we bear God's image, there's a way in which we are analogous to God. We are sort of copies of God. We're not the original, but we're sort of copies, and as close as a creature can be. Okay? Now, it's already been alluded to also, but it needs to be stated more clearly. Okay? For Christians, the world that we live in today is not the world that God created. Okay? That is, in creation, there was no sin, no evil, no death, and no suffering. Man was in perfect fellowship with God. But the entrance of sin into the world has disrupted the moral order of the world. This has introduced disorder, chaos, evil, suffering, and death. And ultimately, it will lead to final judgment on sin and sinners. Okay, so the world that we live in today is not the world of Genesis 1. It's the world of Genesis 4 and on. Okay? Something else that needs to be mentioned is the reality of spiritual beings that exist as part of the created order. The reality of spiritual beings. Okay, this includes angels as well as Satan and demons. The Bible clearly acknowledges the existence of spiritual beings that we cannot see, but whose presence and work have effects in the lives of God's people, be they angelic messengers or demonic activity through false teachings or corrupt social and economic systems and such. Okay, so that's an aspect of the created order that we do acknowledge as Christians. Okay, we acknowledge the reality of a spiritual world that we don't see, but does have effects on us here. Okay? What happens at death? Well, when a person dies, they enter what is called the intermediate state, which is an immaterial existence of a person separated from the body. Okay, the soul separates. That's what you can kind of technically define death as the separation of the soul from the body. If you want, you can leave it open. That way we can either get some air in here or people don't lock us out. Now, those who do not come to faith in Christ are judged as sinners and sent to a place of torment where they await the resurrection of their bodies to face their final sentencing and be cast into hell or into the lake of fire. Christians, that is those who believe in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of their sins, enter into the intermediate state where they will enjoy as much bliss as possible as they rule and reign with Christ in heaven. This is not the final state, okay? Christians also await the resurrection of a body upon which they will face the final judgment, but not for condemnation, but where they will receive their final and eternal rewards. The final state of existence is a renewed heaven and a renewed earth. Okay, Isaiah speaks of that in Isaiah 65:17. The new heaven and the new earth. Revelation 21 through 22:5 also. Okay? it's important to assert that the final state of existence is not an immaterial form. We do not exist as these souls, that we have little wings and we're little harps and, on the clouds or something like that. We have our bodies back, but we have the bodies in a sense that we always wanted. We have a glorified body. Okay, now I'm not going to tell everybody here you're all going to have six-pack abs, okay? Whatever we get is going to be perfect and glorious, okay? But we have the bodies in a sense that God always intended us to have. I know if some people had their hopes up and then crushed right away. Okay, the final state of existence is what the Bible will call shalom. Shalom, it's a state of peace, a state of complete harmony, not only between God but with man and with the created order as well. Because if you remember in Genesis, even creation, right, the plant life, thorns and thistles immediately came out of the ground. The ground was cursed because of Adam. In Romans 8 it says that creation groans until the day of redemption. That curse will be lifted one day, and we'll have what is called shalom. Now, how do Christians know anything? Here's some interesting things, right? All knowledge, I'm not even qualifying that, okay? All knowledge is ultimately revelation from God. Now I'll start to qualify, okay? In a Christian worldview, God's knowledge of the world and everything in it, that is all their facts, events, and even their interpretations, okay? God's knowledge precedes their existence in the world. It precedes our knowledge of it. Basically what I'm saying is, before we know it, God already knew it. Okay? And God already knew it because God created it to be that way. Okay? God's knowledge precedes our knowledge. God's knowledge of something is prior to our knowledge. Okay, so before humanity knew what 2 plus 2 was, God already knew it. Okay, God already knew it, and God makes that fact true. It's not, in a sense, so we would want to think like mathematics is this completely separate state of existence that God also just happens to know, and we all plug in to the same thing. No, this knowledge is true because God is the one who grounds the knowledge. Okay? God already knows what a thing is or a law because he's the creator of it. Okay? Now, this is a vast subject, okay, but it needs to be asserted that we know because God knows. Okay? We think the thoughts of God after him. I've said this to a lot of people who are, I guess, my atheist friends and things like that. I tell them this: God's knowledge is archetypal. Okay? That just means it's a source knowledge. It's primary. Our knowledge is what we would say ectypal. Okay, E-C-T-Y-P-A-L. That means it's a copy. It's a reflection. Okay, our knowledge is not the original. Okay, so when somebody, when Newton discovers his, different laws, it's not like he invented them and they became true the moment Newton discovered them. They were always true in the mind of God. Newton, in a sense, this is why I say ultimately it's revelation. Okay, Newton just tapped into God's knowledge.
Secondary.
Yes. Okay? Newton just tapped into God's knowledge, and that's ultimately what we do. So there's a sense, and this is natural revelation, right? When we know parts of the world truly, we also know part of God truly. All of creation tells us something about God. Psalm 19. Okay? And so I'm not saying anything different than what the Bible has already said. I'm just saying it in a different way. Okay? How has God revealed knowledge? Well, he revealed knowledge to two streams of revelation: natural, special, the Bible and the world. We've already covered that, so I won't elaborate any further. Okay, how do we know right and wrong? Well, in Christianity, God's law is the standard for morals and ethics. Okay, this knowledge comes through special revelation of the law. This was revealed through Moses, okay, and the rest of the scriptures. God's will is also revealed in natural revelation and our own selves as bearers of the image of God that render every human morally inexcusable before God. So even if a person doesn't have the Bible, has never seen the Bible, what does Romans 2 say? It says they will still be held accountable to the light that was within them. That every person already on their heart has some knowledge of what God requires of us. According to Romans 1, we all know God.
So we all have that light.
We all have that light. God, and in Romans 1 it says that God has revealed it plainly to every single person so that we are without excuse. Okay, so even if a person has never read the law of Moses, right? You've got some people deep in the jungle of South America somewhere, and they've never heard it. What are they still going to be judged by? they're still going to be judged by the light that they had. The way one person said it, you haven't heard this name in a long time, so I'm going to say it. The way Tim Keller put it one time, okay? He put it this way. He said every single person, I think this is a really fair analogy. He says every single person has an invisible tape recorder around their neck. And every time that person says, you ought to do this, you've created a standard by which you yourself will be judged by.
And that's it.
And at the end of life, all God's going to do is reach around your neck. Oh, where'd the tape recorder come from? I never saw that before, and let you hang yourself. Okay? Going to do it that way, basically. I know that's a pretty interesting analogy. Okay? What is the meaning of human history? Well, this is best answered by the Westminster Shorter Catechism's first question, which asks this. It says, what is the chief end of man? And the answer, and I like it, and John Piper uses it as the basis of his book, Desiring God. The answer is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. I like the way Piper changed it, though. He changed it to glorify God by enjoying Him forever. I think Piper's more correct on the Westminster Shorter Catechism there. Don't let my elders hear that, please. Thank you very much. Okay? But I think that's fundamentally correct. Okay? God didn't create us because He needed pleasure from us. He created us basically so that we can enjoy Him. I mean, there really is no other sound reasoning behind that. That seems to be correct. And then if God, again, you consider the kind of God that we worship. He's a Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit loving and enjoying each other in complete and perfect fellowship. When He creates, in a sense, what does God create us for? To bring us into that. I think the way C.S. Lewis one time said it, and it comes from the Greek word, one of the Greek words that describes that interconnection of the Trinity, or within the Trinity, is the Greek word perikoresis. Do you hear the word choreography in there? Okay? That's part of the idea. Lewis described it as the dance, okay, and he takes a lot of slack for it, but I think he's fundamentally using the Greek word correctly, okay, at least the root word of it. But it's this idea that God invites us into the dance with Him, into perfect fellowship with Him. That's the kind of God that we have. That's the kind of, that when He creates, He doesn't create to take us away from Him. He creates to invite us in to that. All of human history is to display the glory of God. Human history is a purposeful, linear progression. Okay, so it's not cyclic. That means, in Christianity, it's going somewhere. It has a goal that can be summed up in the four headings. Okay, creation, fall, redemption, and consummation. All right, that's where history. That's what all of history can be described as. There's a creation, there's a fall, there's a redemption and a redemptive process, and there's going to be a consummation. Okay. The end of all things and the ushering in of the final, eternal, glorified state. Okay? Now it bears saying that because of God's meticulous providence, the exercise of His divine sovereignty over every event in human history, all of life and all events in life have a plan and purpose with God. This is what gives meaning to history. History is not just a random series of events. History is God fulfilling His will. The Bible is it's a historical record of the working of God in history. If we didn't have the Bible, if we didn't have God's interpretation of history, we would have no idea what God is doing. The Bible gives us a trajectory from creation. It tells us what's everything supposed to be headed toward. This is the eschatology of the Bible. In a sense, early in the book of Genesis, rest. Everything was meant to take us to rest. We were not created, in a sense, to work infinite, right? So every day shouldn't be a Monday. Okay? In a sense, we were created for every day to not be our Friday. This is why Joel Osteen has it wrong, right? Every day was supposed to be our Sabbath. For the Jews, it was their Saturday. For Christians, it's our Sunday, the celebration of the resurrection, the celebration of life. This is what the goal of life is, to take us to the rest. What does it say in the book of Hebrews? That Joshua is trying to take the people to their Sabbath rest. And even in Hebrews, I think 2 or chapter 4, it says that there still remains a rest for the people of God that we're still trying to get into. Okay? So that is history. Finally, what is the good life in Christianity? Well, the good life is summed up in the summation of the law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is the good life in Christianity. What that looks like, how that plays out, is different In a lot of situations, the laws in the Old Testament reveal what it looks like to love your neighbor. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not bear false witness. All that is what it looks like to love your neighbor. The weird laws, and like building rails on your rooftops. Well, how was that loving my neighbor? Well, you did a lot of life up on your rooftop back then. Okay, you didn't want your neighbor falling off your roof and killing himself. Okay, or their 2-year-old running off the roof. So what do? You put rails to show that you love and want to take care of your neighbor. But that is what the good life is loving God, loving people. Right? Where have we heard that before? Anyway. So, all right, let me bring this up here, right? Each of the religions that has been put forth here, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, you can probably think of other religions that I haven't covered, but you know what? Each of these teachings presents a teaching as their way to salvation. Christianity puts forth a person. Think about that. Christianity puts forth a person, not a teaching, not a series of laws that you have to follow. It puts forth a person. Think about this in terms of worldview. When ultimate reality is impersonal, then what are the solutions to life? They are also impersonal. And eventually, you just get a mechanistic world. Well, what do you need to fix your life? You need more meditation. Oh, okay. What do you need? You need less illusion and less ignorance in your life. Well, you need more submission in your life, and everything just becomes very impersonal. Eventually, what do you become? You become what you worship, and you too become impersonal. We become impersonal too. Christianity puts forth a person, Jesus Christ, the sinless Son of God, God himself become a man in order to live the life that we should have and dying the death that we deserved. Religion, I don't care what religion it is, religion says, do this and live. Christianity is this. Jesus says, look what I did for you so you could live. Huge difference. Huge difference. And with that, we are done. I have spoken.